Well folks, this is it. The TA Axe. It's been many months in the making, something I'm incredibly proud of, and there's a lot of effort that's gone behind the scenes on making this thing and the story behind it. And rather than sit here and drone on about how good it is and split wood and things like that, I want to tell you the story of how this is made, because it really is incredible, and it starts right here with this 100-year-old ash tree.
This once majestic ash tree stood proud over the forest for more than 100 years before it blew down in a storm. When I first discovered it, I spent countless hours wondering what could be made from it. After a few months, I decided to mill the main trunk of the tree into planks. I then used these planks to build a cabin with my dad. At the time of milling, we also cut out some longer 9-foot posts that were 4 by 4 inches thick. These then sat under a tarp in the woodland and seasoned. Over the course of a year, I kept walking past these posts, thinking of what to do with them. One day, when chatting to my friend Joe from Thornwood Forge, we decided that the ash would make an ideal handle for an axe. Historically, ash has been used for centuries as a handle material for tools, especially hammers, chisels and axes. This is due to the hardness and shock-resistant properties of the wood. I had met Joe a few years earlier and had seen firsthand the quality of axes and tools that he had made. So we decided, why not make a TA axe and use this 100-year-old ash tree for the handle. That way, the memory of the tree would still be kept alive, and it would be so much more meaningful to its owner. And so, one summer, I began hand cutting the ash posts into 40cm sections. The ash tree lies in the north of the county of Hampshire in England. From here, it starts its 96-mile journey west along the A303, winding its way through Wiltshire and directly past the ancient Stonehenge monument. It then enters into the historic county of Somerset, into the depths of the valley where it enters through the doors of Thornwood Forge. It is here that metal is struck and the axe head is forged. To begin with, Joe cuts off a piece of EN9 steel which will form the axe head. We decided on EN9 because it's exceptionally tough to withstand impact, whilst also having the ability to hold a sharp edge. Key features to have if you are making a high quality, durable tool. The forge is then lit and the block of steel is heated up to 1000 degrees Celsius. Once heated to optimal temperature, a chisel and drift is then used to punch out the eye of the axe. Once the eye has been punched all the way through, Joe takes it over to the power hammer to draw out the cheeks of the axe. When using the power hammer, the axe can be pushed out of shape, and so Joe goes back to using an anvil and flattens out any parts of the axe that are distorted to make sure everything remains symmetrical. On this particular axe, Joe opts to use fellow blacksmith Jimmy to do what is called a smith and striker. This process involves Joe, the smith, holding the piece of hot metal with some tongs, and then resting a fuller tool on top of the metal that he wants hitting, and Jimmy, the striker, using a sledgehammer to hit down onto the piece of metal. This technique is used to separate the blade from the eye. The power hammer is then used again to draw out the blade into its bearded shape. A hammer is then used to shape the cheeks of the axe into the final shape. The next stage is to grind and profile the axe. Joe removes the majority of the material with a coarse 36 grit to begin with. He then uses a finer 220 grit belt to further remove any rough edges and lines. Now it is on to the final stages of the forging process. This is known as breaking the corners. Joe uses a light hammer and gently runs it along the edges of the axe, putting a chamfer on it. This isn't necessary at all, but this extra attention to detail is what makes this axe stand out as a really well-made tool. Joe then uses the drift to even out the eye and make sure the axe is straight on both sides. For the last part, Joe heats up the axe, ready to put the touch mark in. The touch mark is the blacksmith's stamp. It's not only a sign of who made the piece, but also a sign of quality. A blacksmith doesn't put a touch mark on anything he is not happy with. On the TA axe, one side of the axe contains the touch mark of Thornwood Forge, and the other side is the stamp of TA Outdoors. This not only shows the axe as a TA Outdoors official product, but it shows that I fully back the quality of Joe and the Thornwood Forge blacksmiths. The axes are then individually number stamped to make each axe unique to the person that owns one. Then the final steps of the forging process come to a close. The axe head is heated up and left to cool down with the forge. This is known as annealing. It reduces the stress in the steel that was created during the forging process. However, if left like this and then sharpened, the axe would get blunt again very quickly, as the steel is soft. So it then needs to be hardened. To do this, the axe is heated up to critical temperature around 820 degrees Celsius and then cooled down rapidly. This is done by quenching the axe in vegetable oil. This is a very important part of the process. If you cool it down too fast, the steel could warp and crack, and if you cool it down too slow, it won't harden and will remain too soft. After hardening, the axe then needs to be tempered. When you harden steel, it can become very brittle. With an impact tool like an axe, you need to temper that hardness with toughness, and so tempering improves the toughness of the axe. To do this, the axe is heated from the pole at the back, and letting that heat bleed through to the edge. Once the blade of the axe starts to turn a yellow straw colour, usually around 200 degrees Celsius for this steel, it is ready to be quenched in water. With the forging process complete, the axe now needs to have a sharp edge put onto it. And so it's back onto the grinding belt, where Joe grinds in the bevel of the axe using a 36 grit belt to begin with. Then he goes down to a finer belt, the 80 grit, then 180, 220, 400, and then he finishes it off with a surface conditioning belt. The last stage is to then polish off the burr on the buffing wheel. Now the axe is shaving sharp and ready to have the handle put on. The final weight of the axe head after grinding is 600 grams. This is my favourite part of the entire axe making process, probably because I feel like I have a personal attachment to that ash tree. Joe traces around a template that he made. Using a bandsaw, Joe cuts out one handle from the ash block. This he cuts at 28mm thick. Then, in a similar fashion to the grinding of the axe head, Joe smooths out the rough edges of the axe handle using the belt grinder. He then uses a pencil to mark out the centre line which will go through the middle of the axe head. Then he marks out facet lines on each edge of the handle. This is to act as a guide for the material that he needs to remove to round off the rough edges of the handle. So it's back onto the grinding belt as Joe manoeuvres the ash handle to put the final contours and bevels onto it. He then narrows out the top section of the handle and cuts a small slot, which is where the axe head is going to be secured using a wedge. Using a hardwood mallet, Joe drives the axe head onto the handle into its final place. To ensure the axe head is tightly secured to the handle, he drives in a small wooden wedge. The protruding edge of the wedge is then cut off with the bandsaw. To further secure the axe head, Joe drives in a metal cross wedge. It's not really necessary, but it does ensure that the axe head is securely fitted to the handle. The handle is then finished with a thick coat of boiled linseed oil. This is to help provide a protective layer over the wood and bring out the natural grain in it. It's at this moment you can really see the incredible grain pattern of the 100-year-old ash tree that you saw in the beginning of the video. So the axe itself is now complete. But this isn't the end of the story. We then head a further 20 miles west to the county of Devon, where the last remaining oak bark tannery in Britain is found. J and F.J. Baker is a family-run business that dates back to 1862. The leather that is made in this tannery takes 18 months to create. It's a fascinating process, and it's here that the leather is made for the axe sheaths. It starts out with the 400-year-old water wheel, which is powered by the small river which runs through it. This water wheel then powers the machine which grinds up all of the oak bark that has been collected. The bark is then put into these pits, where water from the river is used to fill each of them up to make different strength bark solutions. The locally sourced cowhides then enter into this warehouse where they are covered in salt. They then head up into the lime yard, where they are soaked in a lime solution. The lime penetrates the hides and makes the pores swell, which loosens the hair and congeals the fat, which in turn makes it easier to scrape off the hide. This process takes 2 weeks to do. Each individual hide is then run through these 2 machines. The machine on the right removes the hair, and the machine on the left removes the congealed fat. The fat is then collected and shipped off to make household detergents. Not much is wasted in this tannery. The hides then enter into the old 16th century lime yard, which is where each hide is individually inspected. They look for scars, size and thickness, and it is then decided what type of leather each hide will be used for. Some are used for shoemaking. Other long hides with no scars on them are used for backs for the harness industry. Any shoulder hides are then de-haired by hand in this room. This is because sometimes the hair on the shoulders doesn't come out as easily on the machines, and so it needs further work by hand to remove. The raw hides then head up to the tanning pits to be soaked in the bark tan solutions. They start at the far end in the weakest solution. They always start in the weakest solution so that they are tanned from the inside out. Otherwise, if they start in the strongest solution and then move to a weaker solution, the bark tan won't penetrate the hides as well. The hides are then moved by hand daily, and then each week they are moved into another pit of a slightly stronger solution. If you look carefully, the vertical columns in this room are moving. That's because these are powered by the 400-year-old water wheel, and the reason the hides are constantly moving at this stage is so they don't stick together and leave any bare patches that don't get tanned evenly. They are then washed in the solution like this for 8 weeks before they are moved onto the next area. Here they are stored horizontally for a year, and in between the hides are these oak Valonia cups. They are used to separate the hides from sticking to each other, but they are also one of the most ancient natural dyes. They naturally leach dye into the solution, and they have been used in the hide tanning process for over 1,000 years. After the hides have been in the solution for a year, they are then rinsed off and hung up to dry. The tanning process has now finished, and the hides then enter the currying process. This is where fats and moisture are reintroduced into the hides. While they are wet, they are put through this setting machine. Each hide is then individually hand-dyed and taken upstairs, where natural greases are applied to the leather to hydrate it again. In this particular solution, fish oil is used. Once dried, they are moved to another room where the dubbins are prepared and applied to them. Dubbins are prepared from oil, natural wax and tallow, which is then used to soften, condition and waterproof leather. The leather is then sized up, priced and given to the customer who ordered it. In this case, it went to Joe, who then sent it off to John, who makes each individual leather TA axe sheath by hand. To make the sheaths, the leather is cut, beveled and burnished before being switched closed and fitted to each individual axe. And that is the story of how the TA axe is made.
So there you go, from tree to axe. I'm very, very proud of this. I'm really pleased with the guys at Thornwood Forge who make it. They've been incredible to work with. It's been a kind of bit of a stressful process to get everything together and the logistics behind getting these handmade in England. It's something I'm very, very proud of. We already have the TA Trekker backpacks, which have been a phenomenal success. They've been going for a couple of years now, and yeah, you guys seem to be really enjoying them, and we're still making them. And now I'm just super proud to be able to bring out an axe. I know it's more of a hatchet really, but we've called it the TA axe. And you know, it's part of my logo, so it's been with my brand for 10 plus years now. It's just taken me that long to finally get one designed and made here in England. So yeah, if you guys are interested, they're live now on the website, which is taaoutdoors.com. I guess just thank you. We're at that time of year coming up towards the end of 2023 where we kind of begin to reflect, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watched and supported me over not just this last year, but over the years as well, for all your support. It's been a pretty incredible journey. I'm looking forward to 2024. I've got some really good camping trips planned and ideas and things for videos which I think you're going to enjoy. Some more progress here in the woodlands, and yeah, just lots of fun things. I'll put a link in the description to this should you so wish, and if you're not interested, that's absolutely fine. I appreciate you watching the video anyway. Thank you for the support, guys, and I'll see you soon.